everybody. Welcome to Canvas Kids. This week we are going to be painting a narwhal. So this is what a narwhal looks like. This is what yours is going to look like when you're done. So everybody has your canvas. You have your narwhal traced on it. The first thing you're going to do is this little part of the belly and the eye we need in white. So just take plain white on your brush and just paint a very light coating of white over it so you can still see the lines. You do not have to do it very thick. It's better if you don't, and you don't have to worry about staying in the lines. Okay, when you're all done with the white, we are going to take, I've got 3 different piles of white I made. One of them is going to be mixed with blue for the sky, there's no sky in the water. For the colors of the water, one is going to be made gray for the narwhal, and one is going to be kept left white for the spots on the narwhal's back. So what you're going to do is you're going to take one of your piles of white, and you're going to add just a tiny bit of black. Very, very little, because it will turn very dark very quick. So if you start out with a little bit at a time and add it in, it's the best way to keep adding more, because you can't take it out. You'll have to keep adding white. And when you do that, the white, it'll still never be enough. So that's not quite enough. So I'm going to take a tiny bit more. I wiped some of it off over there in case I need it. Scoop it back up. All right, you don't want your gray being overly mixed because you want it a little bit streaky looking. So kind of like that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint the narwhal, and this brush is definitely going to be too big. So I'm going to take some of this off, put this in the water. So now I'm going to take my gray, actually I'm going to go this way so you can see a little bit better, and I'm going to start out over here. It doesn't really matter where you start out, but you want to do the whole body. That is the gray. You kind of want to do it in sections. So you kind of want to do it, let me show you. See how it's, you have to kind of paint like the direction. So you can see my paint strokes, and they're going with the direction of the body. And like with the tail, they're going this way and they're going this way. So you kind of want to stick to each part of the narwhal separately. So I'm going to do his whole body first, then I'm going to come back and do his fin. Then I'll do his other separate. And just use whatever brush is the best size for you. I'm going to start out with this bigger brush. Then I'm going to switch to the smaller brush. And if you go over the lines, don't worry about it too much. You can always fix it when you do the background, or you can fix it and leave it a little bigger than what he was. You can leave it the way he is, I should say, not fix it. All right, I'm going to switch to a smaller brush again. I'm going to switch to this brush so I can get the edges a little better, okay? Get his tail first. Finish off his tail. Remember, try not to paint it too thick. See how I'm going the direction of his body? That's what you want. Now you might hide his mouth when you put the paint down, depending on the color of your gray. But if you do, don't worry about it. So you can kind of see where it is because there's that little spot right there where you can see where it is. So you can always go back and put it in afterward. And if you accidentally go over the lines with your gray, the blue that should be in the background should cover it up and you won't notice it. It's a little tricky around the eye. Okay, now once I got the eye done, I can go back that direction with my brush strokes. All right, so now that the main part of his body is done, I'm going to go back and I'm going to do this part of his fin. And I'm going to do this part. Now be careful you don't go over where his belly is, because that you're not going to be able to hide if you go over the line there. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of white to, in fact, let me get some out of here. I'm going to add a little bit more white to my gray because I want it slightly lighter where his tail is, his tail fins are, just so you could really see them good. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. It's up to you. But I just want to lighten my gray up a little bit, just so there's some variance in color. A little bit. Turn. Okay, so see how his tail fins are just a little bit lighter. Not a big difference. Okay. So now that we are done with that part, we're going to let him dry while we work on the background. So with the background, what you want to do is, big one, is first we need to make a lighter blue. So I'm going to take the pile of white that I have and I'm going to add some blue to it. And try not to add like more blue than there is white. You definitely want less blue and more white. But you see, you kind of want it about that color. Then what we're going to do is we're going to paint the whole background in blues. But we're going to do 3 different shades of blue. So the first shade of blue is going to be at the bottom. Because I turned it around. It's going to be at the top, sorry. So about a third of the canvas, we are going to do it in the lightest of the blues that we're going to make. Sometimes when the paint has trouble getting in, you can just kind of push it with the sides of the brush if you're using a flat one. If you're not using a flat one, it's fine. Keep getting paint on the table. Okay, so keep painting your ocean, and you want about a third of it in the dark color, third of it in the medium color, and then a third of it in the lightest color. And it's easiest if you start at the lightest color at the top and then add more blue rather than adding more white. It works much better because of the blue being so dark. It's much, much better. And try to go side to side with your brushes, not all over the place, just because it's like the ocean and the water isn't all crazy underneath. Now, when you get to the narwhal, it's when you got to be the most careful. And it doesn't have to be exactly 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. Just do your best. Now when I make my medium color, I am going to kind of outline around him better. Okay, so once you get your first layer on, you want to add a little bit more blue. And make it a little darker. Now the reason why we're not using just plain blue on the bottom is because on the bottom is where he is going to have some things growing that are the pure blue. So we can't use like just the plain blue on the very bottom, or you wouldn't be able to see those. So next, when you make your medium blue, go for another third of the canvas. And you might not even see too much difference, but there's probably more than you think. And you can just overlap a little to blend them in. I'm going to go back with my brush that's smaller as soon as I get the paint off the big one. So I'm just going to kind of push the two together so they kind of blend, so you don't see like a line. You don't want one line separating your colors. You want them to blend together. Okay, so I'm going to switch to the smaller brush now. It's the round brush, so I can outline the narwhal. So be real careful around his horn. That's the trickiest part, is getting around them. Use whatever brush is the easiest for you to do it with. You might not have a lot of choices of brushes, but it's okay, you don't have to. fix that, even though it's going to be dark right there. It's all right though. Just I saw a spot I missed. Okay, so now I'm going to follow around with my blue and my smaller brush. Okay. Let's fill that in. Oops, I just put my hand in it. Oh, not too bad. Okay, so trace around with the smaller brush, and then you can go back and see how you can kind of fix it. So even though I traced around going up and down, I went back and I kind of went over it, so it went side to side like the rest of the paint did. Okay, now I'm just going to trace around his whole body, even if down below it's going to be the dark, just because I've got the medium and I might as well finish outlining him. And then when you go through with the darker color, you can just blend them together and you won't even notice. Besides, it's the ocean. It doesn't really matter what color blue it is all over, because it's just a natural ocean. Might not be the same color blue all over. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I have my canvas panel sitting up on top of a canvas that's upside down. And the only reason why I do that is I don't have a tablecloth underneath my canvas panel. And if you don't put a tablecloth underneath, you're going to end up with paint all over your table. And I don't want to do that. So instead of putting a tablecloth down, I paint on top of another painting upside down, just so I don't get anything on the table. But you do it however is the easiest for you. Okay, so now that I have him outlined, I'm actually going to go back with the bigger brush to finish it up. So I'm going to finish the third of it. And if you go a little past the third, it doesn't matter. Really doesn't. It's just about a third. Okay, see, I have the canvas underneath it. That just props it up. Now I'm going to take more blue and add it and make even a darker color. And this is going to be for the bottom of the ocean. It's going to be the darkest. You could always, sometimes it's kind of hard to see it on the plate, but you could always try it out a little bit first. Like, I'm going to go a little darker because that's not quite dark enough. So I'm going to take even more and add it to it. All right, now I'm going to go ahead. See, now you can see how much darker it is. So you can always just try it out. If it doesn't look darker when you put it on the canvas, then go ahead and add more of the color. You can always add it, just can't take it out. Okay, now it gets tricky because when you're doing the edges, you can't really grab your canvas from anywhere that isn't wet. So if you need to go over the lighter color, you can just kind of go over it a little bit. You have to make sure it's all completely covered with the darker. Even that's where the darker's supposed to be. You won't even notice it when you're all done. So go ahead and finish it off with the darker color. Blend it a little bit into your previous color so you don't have a big line there. All right. So that is all set. So now, because we were doing that, our narwhal is probably dry now. I'm going to take a small brush and I'm going to take straight blue, nothing mixed in it. And now I'm going to paint his eye. So the outer part of his eye is white, and then the inside part, he's got blue. Now this is the tricky part because if you don't have a good brush that has a good tip on it, which I do not, it has a tendency for the bristles of the brush to stick out. All right, so even though the middle part is going to be black, you know, the pupil part of the eye is going to be black when you're done. You can just paint that whole other part blue for now, and then you can go back and you could put a black spot inside of there. So now that his eye is partially done and his body is dry, what we're going to do is take straight white paint, and we need to paint his little spots for his back. See how he's got spots on his back? You can paint as many spots as you want. Don't have to have exactly like mine, as many as you want. Do what you want. And that's why we didn't want him like too pale though either, because we want him to show a little, but they don't have to show a whole bunch. So it depends on what color yours ended up being. And they don't have to be perfectly round. They're just natural spots on him. So they don't have to be perfectly round. And then you could do some that are on his back, so it's only like a half a spot like that. And then you can do other ones that are very small. Do all different sizes. You might want one big one here, but they don't have to be solid circles. You could do the shapes that you want and how many you want. And they didn't go all the way to his head. They kind of went only partially up his back. But it's up to you where you want to put it. So I'm just going to go with that many right now. And wait for your blue of the ocean to dry. As long as it's dry around his horn, that is going to be the next step we are painting. Switch paper towels to a drier one. Okay, so what we're going to do is everybody has bronze. I didn't give you very much because you don't need very much. So take your bronze and paint your horn of your narwhal. Use whatever brush will work best for you. This one's a little big, but the bristles don't stick out as far as my little one does. And go ahead and paint his horn the bronze color. If after you do the first layer, it doesn't look bronze enough, you can wait till it dries and then do a second layer. It might be a little bolder that way, a little darker. But I'm only going to do one layer, but it's up to you. If you need a second layer, go ahead and do it. If you ever need a second layer of any of your spots of paint, you can do it. Okay. There we go. There we go. His horn is done. I went over the end again and it looked better once I went over the second time. Okay, so now that that's done, you're going to outline a little bit in black of around the narwhal. You're only doing it to have a little bit of an outline, not really for much of a reason other than just for it to show up better and highlight some areas. So first, I'm going to go from right underneath his horn to his mouth. So you could just follow that line around even if you don't see it anymore. You could just, it's the natural way it would go. And then I'm going to do, and it's only supposed to be an outline, so you're going to try to get it as skinny as you can with the tip of your paintbrush. And if you miss a few spots, don't worry about it. It looks better. Because sometimes when you outline, every spot doesn't have to be covered. So just outline it. See, now that's a little thick. It would have looked better if I would have got it thinner. And now I'm just going to kind of, even though there's hardly any paint left on the brush, that looks better. And one trick you could try, wait, I can't talk and paint at the same time. One trick you could try, which is a little bit cheating, but it's okay if it's easiest for you, is when it is completely dry, you can do those skinny lines with a Sharpie marker. And if you do a Sharpie marker, it'll be a lot cleaner and easier to do. If you do a Sharpie marker that's got a nice point to it. So after you do that, also don't forget to take the black paint and paint in the very, very center of your narwhal eyeball. Okay. And even though it's going to be wet, I'm going to do this now. I'm going to take the back of my brush, dip it in the white, and, oops, it's not a good point. Put the little white dot for the, it's like shining off of it. Okay. All right, so now our narwhal is all outlined. His horn is drying. We're going to wait till his horn is dry a little bit more if you want to put a pattern on it. So next what we're going to do, since the top is mostly dry, is we're going to take some white paint and we are going to make bubbles. They don't have to be real neat. Just take your white paint and make some circles. They're not supposed to be completely filled in. They can be different sizes. You can make how many you want. You can make some little ones. You can make some bigger ones. But you don't want to make a big dot. You don't want that. You're trying to make it so it looks like a bubble, so it's just the outer edge, not filled in all the way. So let me show you what I did on the first one. See, I've got different sizes and I've got them all across the top. It's up to you how many you want to do. And also put a little bit of a line in some of them like this. All on the same side though. So just kind of make a little like this. You don't have to do it on all of them. And some could be real light like that because it could be like the bubbles about top. So just go ahead and do them how many you want all around the top. You only want them on the top half of the canvas because They're coming from him and they're like blowing back. So that's what it's supposed to look like. I'm not going to do any more because I don't want to waste all that time. But go ahead and do all your bubbles on the top. And then when you're done, come back and I'm going to show you now what to do on the bottom half. But you pause it and then come back when you're done. And then we're going to pretend like you did that. And I'm going to keep going. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make the lines at the bottom. I have to see which brush to use because I don't remember which brush I used the first time. But I'm going to use strictly pure blue. So that way that's mixed with the white. So this will show up. And I'm just going to make little wavy things growing off the bottom. I think I did use this brush the first time. And once again, it's up to you how many you want. You want some of them to be taller. You want some of them to be shorter. But you just kind of want to make them wavy because they're floating with the water. You don't want to make them straight. And you can do them so they're kind of joined together, like a clump of them. You could do some separate single ones in between. But that's how you do it. Just kind of make it a little wavy. Make sure you go all the way down to the bottom because it's growing out of the ground. Okay, I'm just going to hurry up and do some at the end here just to finish. Okay, so now when you're all done with that, you're going to go back through, and I'm going to use a smaller brush for this. We're not actually using the brush. We are going to be using the back of the brush. Oh, you know what? I forgot to trace one part. Wait a minute. Forgot to trace around the eye. Okay. Don't forget to take your skinny marker and trace around your eye so it'll show up better. Okay. Now that I did that, looks much better now as eye. Okay, so take your skinniest brush that you have because we're using this part of it, not this part of it. And take your white paint and dip the end in. And now what you're going to do is we're going to make some little white things that look like they're growing out of the bottom. I'm only going to show you how to do a few because you don't have to be shown how to do all of them. But you're just going to take your white and dot your plant. And do it also on an angle. You don't want a straight plant. You don't want this. Oops. You don't want it completely straight like that. You want it to have a little bit of a wave to it. So like that. You can make some shorter, some taller. But just keep going back and dipping it in your paint when you run out on the end. So then just fill up the bottom where you want. This is how mine ended up on the bottom. So just put in however many you want, okay? And the last step I did not show you on here because I wanted to leave it blank to show you. Now you can just leave it blank like that, or you can make a pattern on it. And I'm going to show you two different patterns on the same narwhal, but it's up to you how you want it to go. So what you're going to do is you can leave it plain. You can leave your horn plain, or there's two different techniques you could do to make it look like it's got like a texture to it. So you either can do the easier way to make it look like it has ovals. My brush is not good for this. But you could just make ovals or up to the top like this. And it'll look like it's got kind of a pattern on it. Or what you could do is you can make it do like a real horn, like a unicorn horn, or kind of like stripes on a candy cane. So like for a candy cane, if you compare it to a candy cane, like the bronze is the white part of the candy cane, and the black paint is like the red stripes. How they have a shape to them like this, so it looks like your thing is more curved and they're like it's wrapped around them. And then just kind of space them out about the same. You could do either one of those techniques, or you could just leave your horn plain. So I liked this one plain, and I'm going to leave it that way. So it's up to you. And then don't forget to put your initials somewhere on the bottom of the canvas, and you are done with your narwhal. All right, so thanks for joining me. And next week, it's going to be a Valentine Day truck. Thank you.